Coming up on Arirang News. The death toll surges to over 17,000 from the massive earthquakes in Turkey and Syria earlier this week. Rescuers from around the world, including South Korea, continues to work desperately to save survivors under the rubble amid freezing cold weather. North Korea shows off an array of intercontinental ballistic missiles during its nighttime parade on Wednesday, the most it's ever displayed at one time. Some analysts raise concerns saying they could challenge the defense system of the U.S. Amid sluggish exports and consumer spending, the South Korean economy is likely to experience a slowdown in the first half of this year. This from a report by a state-run think tank, but it adds the reopening of the Chinese economy will help boost the economic recovery in the second half. Hello, it's 9 p.m. here in South Korea, and thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin this evening with the devastating earthquakes and rescue operations in Türkiye and Syria. The death toll has topped 17,000. Rescuers are battling against time and the cold weather as they search for survivors under the rubble. Kim Jong-un starts us off.
The death toll climbs after the devastating quakes in Türkiye and Syria. The number of deaths tops 17,000, with more than 14,000 confirmed dead in Türkiye and more than 3,000 killed in Syria. Hopes to find more survivors wane as time passes on. More than 72 hours have passed since the first quake hit, a critical window referred to as the golden time, as the survival rate dramatically plummets down to 5 to 10% after 3 days. Rescuers battle against time and freezing cold temperatures as they continue their search.
We do whatever is needed, whether it is that water needs to be carried or that soil needs to be thrown. We enter or exit. We do everything. We try to help as much as we can.
Tens of millions more are affected from the quakes. Turkish officials say that it's around 13.5 million people over a 450-kilometer area. And according to the United Nations, nearly 11 million people in Syria have been affected, while more than a third of them rely on humanitarian aid for basic supplies of clean water and food. The World Health Organization also warned of a secondary health crisis. The WHO's earthquake response manager, Robert Holden, said that survivors are now out in the open and subject to horrific conditions with limited access to water, fuel, and communications. He stressed that if their needs are not met, there's a real danger of survivors becoming exposed to further harm. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan paid his first visit to Turkey's worst affected region on Wednesday local time. He's been the subject of mounting criticism for a slow and inadequate rescue response. But during his first visit, he defended his position, saying that it's not possible to be ready for a disaster like this. Help is pouring in from all over the world. Rescue teams from several Asian countries have landed in Türkiye to lend a helping hand and find survivors under the rubble. And the first UN aid crossed into Syria from Türkiye on Thursday. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
As thousands of people are still waiting to be rescued in the freezing cold, the South Korean rescue team sent to Türkiye has saved a total of 5 survivors on its first day of operation. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
Rescue workers pull out a survivor from the rubble of a destroyed building. The South Korean search and rescue team found a man in his mid-70s, only about an hour and a half after they began their operation. As of 8 p.m. Korea time, the team has rescued 4 more people, including a 2-year-old girl and her 40-year-old father, as well as a 35-year-old woman and a 10-year-old girl. South Korean local media outlets initially reported that the woman was the 2-year-old's mother, but Seoul's foreign ministry later clarified that this was not the case. The ministry also added that other than minor injuries, all of those that were rescued are in good health.
South Korea's foreign ministry will continue to support the Korea disaster relief team and make sure that the government can effectively provide assistance to Türkiye.
Upon Turkey's request, the South Korean team has been in Turkey's southeastern region of Antakya since 5 a.m. Thursday local time. An official from the Foreign Ministry explained that Antakya is one of the areas hit hardest. Extreme cold weather and the scale of the damage have been making search and rescue operations extremely difficult. The 118-member rescue team left Seoul on Tuesday night, along with search dogs and medical supplies to help with rescue efforts. The team will continue their operation in Türkiye until February 17th. The South Korean government said it plans to provide aid to Syria as well, once international organizations announce their humanitarian aid needs. Peunji, Arirang News.
South Korean President Yoon visited the Turkish Embassy in Seoul this afternoon to pay his respects to the victims of the earthquakes and pledged more rescue workers from South Korea. Their Turkish ambassador to South Korea, Murat Tamer, said Türkiye can feel the brotherhood between the two countries because of all the help, adding that Türkiye will never forget it. President Yoon wrote in a book of condolence that South Korea will stand by its brother country and hopes Türkiye can stand back up with courage and hope. His spokesperson added that the president was happy to hear about the first saved person by South Korean rescue workers and asked them to make sure the brotherly love is delivered to the people there. And as widely expected, North Korea staged a massive military parade late Wednesday to mark the founding anniversary of its army. It featured the largest number of missiles in the history of its parade, including what's presumed to be a new ICBM. Our defense affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
North Korea's largest ever military parade was yet another message of defiance against denuclearization, with the regime's newest missiles on display and the next generation of the ruling Kim family attending the nighttime event. State media Korean Central News Agency on Thursday released images of the regime's 75th Army founding anniversary, which kicked off the night before. Among the array of weaponry moving across Kim Il-sung Square, official photos and satellite imagery showed what appeared to be 11 Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missiles. The Hwasong-17 is reportedly the largest road-mobile liquid-fueled ICBM in the world and is capable of reaching the United States mainland. The ICBM was largely expected to appear in the parade, and international observers speculate the North is working on upgrading the missile with a solid-fuel engine, which offers a more stable and rapid liftoff. But what stalled the show were the large missile canisters atop 5 new 18-wheel launch vehicles. They're believed to contain new solid-engine ICBMs under development.
And those canisterized ICBMs, those are probably just, for the moment, prototypes. They're probably not anywhere near deployable, and maybe probably not even operational. But they're showing the direction that they're going in, and given the fact that we are relatively certain that North Korea's had at least 2 and possibly even more solid fuel static engine tests, that they are moving towards accomplishing their task at some point.
In addition to quantitative progress in its missile technology, the expert says the sheer number of missiles displayed at the parade sends a message to the United States.
The number of ICBMs indicates that North Korea is trying to show the United States that missile defense is a losing bet, that it will always be possible, or most of the time will be possible, for North Korea to build ICBMs faster and cheaper than the United States can build interceptors as a part of the missile defense network for the homeland United States.
Another surprising factor was the attendance of Kim Jong-un's young daughter Kim Joo-ae, reported by state media. Experts say her presence reinforces the message that Pyongyang sees its nuclear prowess as the future for its younger generation, hinting that it will not be scrapping its nuclear weapons program. An estimated 22,000 people were mobilized at the milestone event, marking it the largest parade the regime has ever held. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin is heading to Germany next Friday to attend the annual Munich Security Conference. The Foreign Ministry says that Park will introduce South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy focused on promoting peace and prosperity in the region. Park is also expected to hold bilateral talks with ministers and high-ranking officials from other countries. The three-day event aims to address today's key foreign and security challenges, including the war in Ukraine. There has been a rather disturbing allegation by Washington with regard to the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon that it shut down last weekend. U.S. authorities say it was part of a wider fleet of spy balloons by Beijing across 5 continents. Kim Mo-gyun has more.
The United States has said that Chinese spy balloons, like the one that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina over the weekend, have been found on at least 5 continents across the globe. According to the Defense Department spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the balloons have been detected in other regions, including South America, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Europe. And while the size and capabilities varied, they were all used for surveillance purposes. The Biden administration says Washington shared information related to the balloons with some 40 allies and partners, including South Korea. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says China has been working to develop surveillance balloons for years in order to gain intelligence insight. The U.S. is now studying debris from the balloon, which it retrieved after shooting it down over open water on Saturday. China condemned the U.S.'s downing of the balloon, calling it unacceptable and irresponsible. China also maintains that the balloon was for civilian use and had blown off course.
This balloon is not American. The Chinese government will continue to defend its legitimate rights and interests.
The appearance of the surveillance balloon caused a political uproar in the United States and prompted top U.S. diplomat Anthony Blinken to cancel a 2-day trip to Beijing that both countries hoped would help mend frosty relations.
As to who's responsible for that? China is. Well, the fact is, China engaged in this irresponsible action, a violation of our sovereignty and territorial integrity and international law.
U.S. President Joe Biden mentioned the latest incident during his State of the Union address, reiterating that if Beijing threatens Washington's sovereignty, the U.S. will act to protect its country. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
We build a global coalition.
A state-run think tank believes Korea's economy will remain in the doldrums during the first half of this year, but will see a tangible rebound in the second half on the back of greater market activity in neighboring China. Our Finance Ministry correspondent Lee Dae-yeon has details.
The economic slowdown is worsening in South Korea. That's according to the Korea Development Institute in a report released on Thursday. Considering this, the institute lowered its economic growth forecast from 1.4 to 1.1% for the first half of this year. This comes after sluggish export figures for the country, with lower chip exports being one of the major factors. Exports overall last month dropped 16.6% compared to a year earlier. Specifically, chip exports were down over 44%, steel dropped almost 26%, and petrochemicals plunged 25% on year. The country's quarterly GDP growth rate for the fourth quarter of last year saw a drop of 0.4% compared to the previous quarter. Domestic consumption in December dropped 2.5% as consumer prices remained high. Considering a rise in public utility charges, the institute also raised the inflation forecast for this year to 3.5% from 3.2%. In terms of the global economy, the institute reported a temporary shrink amid an overall drop in trade and the rapid spread of COVID-19 in China. But it also mentioned that easing inflation in many countries and the weakening U.S. dollar show signs of a possible recovery for the global economy. Meanwhile, the institute expects South Korea's economy to see a rapid recovery in the second half of 2023, keeping its economic growth forecast for 2023 as a whole at 1.8%.
Although the first half of this year may see a deepening economic slowdown, the second half may see a quick recovery. Reopening in China may fuel South Korea's exports to reach over the economic growth forecast.
However, the report added that as this forecast depends on external matters such as China's economy and rate hikes in the U.S., there is still a high chance that Korea's economic recovery could be delayed. It also mentioned that housing market declines may also be a risk that could affect consumption and investment in construction. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary visits a joint venture battery plant between GM and South Korea's LG Energy Solution in Tennessee. This as part of the United States' latest efforts to boost the green energy sector, as has been noted by President Biden earlier. Yoon has more.
On Wednesday, U.S. Secretary General Janet Yellen visited the Ultium Cells Spring Hill battery cell manufacturing plant in Tennessee. The plant is the second of 3 planned joint ventures between General Motors and LG Energy Solution. Currently under construction, the facility is set to begin production later this year, with expectations that it will eventually employ 1,700 people. The visit is part of a week-long travel itinerary, with Yellen and other cabinet officials touting the Inflation Reduction Act's boosting of green energy manufacturing and battery production. Speaking at the site, Yellen stressed President Joe Biden's economic plan to rescue the U.S. economy. The visit also comes as the U.S. Treasury Department changed the classification of electric crossover vehicles from passenger cars to SUVs. The update in vehicle classification standards raises the retail price cap from $55,000 to $80,000 to allow more electric vehicles like GM's electric Cadillac Lyriq, Tesla's 5-seat Model Y, and Volkswagen's ID.4 to be eligible for $7,500 in tax credits. The Treasury said China currently produces 70% of batteries for electric vehicles manufactured in the U.S., and the tax credit rules are designed to shift the battery supply chain away from China. It added that since August, dozens of companies across the clean energy spectrum have announced tens of billions of dollars worth of investment in the United States. LG Energy appears to be taking a cautious approach to battery plant investment, while GM pushes ahead aggressively in pursuit of its plan to launch 30 new EV models worldwide by 2025. 이은진, Arirang News.
Electric vehicles have become an increasingly common sight around the world, including here in South Korea. With a growing preference for eco-friendly spending, the electric car market is projected to grow even further this year. Shin Ha-young has the details.
Despite the global economic slowdown, sales of electric vehicles were strong enough to take up about 10% of all new cars sold globally in 2022. According to data released by auto industry researchers LMC Automotive, global sales reached 7.8 million units, showing an impressive on-year increase of 68%. This was mainly due to solid growth in China and Europe. Data released by South Korea's Transport Ministry shows that the country closely matches the global trend with a total of 390,000 registered EVs, up 68.4% from the previous year, while registration of gasoline cars only rose by 2.6%. With a growing preference for eco-friendly spending, sales of electric cars are expected to increase. For this year, about 12.8 million new electric vehicles are expected to be registered worldwide, taking up 16% of all newly registered vehicles. For South Korea, demand in 2023 is expected to hit 200,000 vehicles. But having the right infrastructure is crucial. In South Korea, there's one charging point for every 2.6 electric vehicles, and that's far better than one charger per 7.2 vehicles in China or 15.5 EVs in Europe. However, further development of EV infrastructure is still needed for the country to boost its electric car market.
Because Koreans tend to prefer a fast-paced lifestyle, EV owners want fast chargers. The government will continue to expand the supply, and private firms are already entering this charging business. This is expected to gradually ease any inconveniences.
There is still a lack of charging infrastructure and a high risk of fire that puts people off buying EVs. Using gas stations or public facilities by relaxing regulations could be a way to establish more charging points.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Environment Ministry announced reformed subsidies rules that it says will increase the supply of EV infrastructure and service centers. Full subsidies will be given to buyers of cars from automakers that operate customer service centers in Korea and an online service data management system. The government has also raised the price ceiling of EV subsidies by 2 million Korean won, or roughly $1,600. As a result, vehicles under 57 million won, or around $45,000, will be able to receive the full subsidy. 신하영, Arirang News.
The amount foreign investors cashed out from South Korean bonds last month reached an all-time high. Data from the Bank of Korea show foreign selling of local bonds last month came to around $5.3 billion. They unloaded their bonds, the report said, because the Korean currency regained strength last month and bond prices were up. Meanwhile, on the stock market, foreign investors' net purchasing rose to nearly $5 billion, the most since November 2020. The bank attributed this to expectations of slower rate hikes by the Federal Reserve and the economic recovery in China. South Korea, Japan, and China have agreed to cooperate for the successful hosting of the 2024 Gangwon Winter Youth Olympic Games. The countries also issued a joint declaration in which they said they'll seek to expand the spirit of the Olympics, all three countries having hosted the Games in recent years. At the fourth trilateral sports ministers meeting held virtually on Thursday, South Korean Sports Minister Park Bo-gyun spoke with his Japanese counterpart Keiko Nagaoka and Jojin Chang, deputy head of the General Administration of Sport of China. Park said it is the time that the three countries must take leading roles in the sports sector, especially after the pandemic. The three countries also agreed on the importance of the environmental and social value of sports and decided to work together to create a culture that enables people with disabilities and senior citizens to enjoy sports. K-pop girl group Red Velvet will be performing at Primavera Sound, one of the largest music festivals in the world, over in Barcelona and Madrid this summer. Red Velvet will be the only K-pop act joining the event this year and is poised to perform on the opening day at each location. That would be June 1st in Barcelona and June 8th in Madrid. This Spanish music festival has a 22-year history, and this year's lineup includes headliners Blur, Kendrick Lamar, and Halsey.
A low-pressure system is set to bring a mix of rain and snowfall across much of South Korea. As for the amount of rainfall, the further south you are, the more rain you'll be receiving. The south coast will see about 30 millimeters of rainfall, and for Jeju Island, up to 60 millimeters are in the forecast. And for regions with higher elevations where temperatures will be especially low, heavy snowfall is expected. For mountainous regions of Gangwon-do and parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces, up to 15 centimeters are in the forecast. And with the rain and snowfall, fine dust particles will ease off for southern regions. As for the temperatures, highs will continue to stay above the seasonal average. But keep in mind that this will create wide temperature gaps of 10 degrees for most regions. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will be starting off at 2 degrees Celsius. Daily highs in Seoul get up to 10 degrees, Gwangju 12, Busan and Jeju will be reaching 11 degrees. And by contrast, in daily temperatures will continue for the time being. Please be extra careful not to catch a cold. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of the newscast. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow. Hope everyone stays warm and safe. Take care.